of board. Yeah, hi everybody. It's Irene Kashansky here from Keller Williams Portfolio. Thanks for joining us. We will have people jumping on as the time unfolds, but definitely want to be conscious of everybody's time and respectful. And thank you all for joining. I am going to introduce Robert and then jump off. We're in the process of onboarding a new team member. So I'm going to leave Robert in Andy's capable hands. And oh, everybody's joining on now. Hi, Katya and Rita. Thanks for joining us. So Robert is an expert in commercial real estate and investment properties, but he's also someone I would consider a friend. We've known each other for at least 15 years, eh, Robert, if not more? Yep. He's an all-around good guy and very willing to help. I know he'll share a lot of great information with you today. I'll look forward to watching the recording. And perhaps I should just leave the floor to you, Robert. You can give everybody a little bit of background about who you are and how you started. Okay. And I'll leave you the floor.
Okay. I guess I've been in business for probably about close to 17 years now. And I started getting into more commercial probably in my second year. And now I kind of do both commercial and residential. And the stuff that I do land assemblies. I'm working on a lot of commercial leases. I look after Chartwell, which has about 200 locations in Canada, all their retail leasing, but I'm also helping an optical optometry chain open up in Canada. And we're at 8 or 9 locations now. We're opening 50 locations in Canada. And on top of that, I also have a lot of investor clients. So what I'm gonna kind of talk about is just my understanding, what I've been working with. I'm certainly open to other people coming up with things for me to learn. So feel free to jump in if there's anything that I'm not saying that is correct or that you need more information on. By all means, let me know. Okay. What questions does anybody have right now that they want to ask before we jump into the session? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the session itself. And I think you guys can see my screen where we're going to talk about investment properties. Let me just okay. So part of what I'm going to be talking about is basically just how to assess a property if you're helping somebody buy a property and how to list a property. There's a lot of different ways that people are doing in the MLS that I find that, you know, they tout how good a cap rate is or what the ROI is and all that stuff. But the reality is most of my clients are looking for all the expenses, all the income for the property. And the expenses, to make it look better, sometimes what they do is they just avoid certain things in there, okay? So what we're going to be covering, I guess, is just to say, what are some of the items that we should be considering? I'm going to go over a few pieces of terminology in there, and we're going to kind of look at what I call the quick analysis of a property, and then I'll get into the detailed part of the presentation itself. And we're going to look at the income. The initial expenses, part of that is because that's going to go into some of the terminology that we have, as well as the ongoing expenses, and how do you factor in maintenance calculations. I may also share with you guys, I've developed a spreadsheet that's kind of growing. It basically started as a closing costs spreadsheet, but I've kind of created multiple tabs on it, and it's still a work in progress. And because I'm not really that great in Excel spreadsheets. There's a bunch of flaws in there. I know the flaws in my head, but I don't know the flaw to be able to explain it to you. So if somebody says, oh, can I use your spreadsheet? It's kind of beware because I don't fully have all the information that's there and I know where the quirks are. Okay. Um, okay, so some of the terminology, it's an alphabetical order. It's not, we're going to be discussing some of this. If you guys have any questions, just jump in. A lot of times, different people will look at different things of all these terms. There's a whole pile of other terms, but these are the ones that are the most common when I'm dealing with investment properties. So the cap rate or capitalization rate typically is your net operating income divided by your purchase price. Okay. Cash is basically what's your cash outlay, and that includes your down payment that you have to put down, all the closing costs, which is why we look at the initial expenses, and as well as any deferred maintenance fees that have to be paid for. Okay. Cash flow is basically once you take your net operating income, you minus your debt, which is your mortgage, loans, and line of credits, or whatever it is that you're doing with it. Cash on cash, or COC, is basically what's your cash flow divided by cash to see what's your return on investment. Because some properties, you're better off to just put it into a GIC, and but it might be touted as something amazing. But I usually gotta go through all that with my clients, and the spreadsheet and the analysis that I do is what I give my clients. And I've gotten now more and more clients kind of look into my one-shot snapshot and then using that as their basis for purchasing. Okay. Your NOI is just the gross income minus the ongoing expenses that you have. I also, as part of my spreadsheet, I've also created it where I've allocated percentage increases and so on. So you know what the forthcoming is going to be, plus your rent increases. Okay. Your return on investment, that's basically your cash on cash divided by cash. Again, what did I put down? What's my return on my the cash that I put in? Okay. Sometimes I do a quick analysis. If I don't have all the numbers in place, there are quite a few apps that you can use on the iPad, on the iPhone, and even on an Android phone that you can do an analysis on that and kind of do a quick by using those apps. I just kind of look at, I might use the 1% rule, is basically does the monthly income equal 1% of the purchase price? Okay, so sometimes I use that just to say, do I want to do a further analysis on it? Alternatively, I might do the 50% rule, and the 50% rule is to say, hey, what is my income? And I'm just going to give it an arbitrary number of 50% for expenses, because that allows for buffer in case I have to fix anything. Usually the expenses are less than 50%, usually. If it is more than 50%, then you're going to have some issues with mortgages and lenders and all that kind of stuff there. Okay. So the 50% rule is just excludes any debt at that time. One of the things I do kind of keep in mind is right now I'm looking at between 450 and 450 and 500 per 100,000, depending on the mortgage that I get and who's the lender, how much is going to be there. Okay. Mortgages are very hard to get right now. I found a lot of lenders are picky. If you left a unit vacant, they get pickier. If you, but then it gives flexibility to the buyer, because if they want to live in one of the units, they can do so. And mortgage lenders right now would prefer if you are doing a self-use on the property itself. Okay. So when I get into, once I do the quick analysis, if it's something that my client feels that it's something worthwhile, obviously the quick analysis I won't do if I'm listing a property, because I'm going to go into the detailed analysis, where basically I go in there and I take a look at what are the property prices to 5 years ago versus what it is now. The reason why I do that is because it gives me an idea of how to calculate my appreciation value. If you want to go into a little bit more detail, you can break it down and say from the 5th year to the 4th year, what was the increase? 4th to 3rd, what was the increase, and so on. Because sometimes the greatest increases are the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, in this case, if you take a look at what's going on in the marketplace, it's just basically the last year or so, we've had a huge increase there, right? I also put in property taxes to see if property taxes on average have gone up or down. Rent increases in my spreadsheet itself. I do track the rent increases for the last however long. I put that in a spreadsheet, and then what I might do is I might average it out over 5 years, average over 3 years, or put the rent increases based on the year. Because a lot of times my clients want to see what has happened and what's the average increases for the last 5 years, as an example. Okay. The utilities is just more of a taking a look back at what you have and increases. You can guesstimate that as well. Insurance increases, I found that lately insurance has gone up quite a bit for investment properties. So if you guys are looking at that, what may have been $2,000 to $3,000, I'm finding is now at $4,000 or $5,000 from the experiences that I have with my investment clients. Okay. Other expenses could be snow removal, landscaping, property management, all of those things you would have to kind of take a look at, and what's the anticipated increases that's there. Okay. In income, obviously the rents of the units themselves, and if there's additional rent for parking spaces. If there is a coin laundry, then we kind of take a look at that. I've had situations where the landlord charges additionally to put AC units in the windows. So that's why I've got AC units in there. And then there's other income that could be there, depending on what it is that you guys, the property itself. The other, I don't see the AC units very often. I don't see the other very often, but certainly the coin laundry, the parking spaces, and the unit rents are there, very common. Okay. Initial expenses, I take a look at. Professional fees is my conversation with a client. I don't talk about commission. I always talk about my professional fee. So hence, that's why I've got that in there. Property inspection, my estimate, if you want to call it that, is I figure a property inspection is going to be $500 for each additional unit. I'm noticing that home inspectors are starting to charge per unit. And so as a result of that, I usually put $500 for one unit and $100 for each additional unit. And that's my assessment on there. If you're buying investment property, whenever you buy a residential property, the property appraisal is never a fee that gets charged. But when you're buying investment property or a commercial type property, they do charge an appraisal fee. And I've seen as high as about $2,000 to $3,000, depending on the size of the property itself. So you'd have to factor that in if you're buying an investment property. The mortgage broker gets a fee, no different than what we do. We get a fee for buying and selling properties. The mortgage broker will get a fee. I've seen anywhere from 1% to 3% on that. And that can be negotiated, no different than we've had people come negotiate with us on our fees as well. And the lender also does charge a fee for lending the money, which I kind of thought was weird, but that does happen because I guess to lend the fee, they're saying we want it's like a signing bonus, if you want, for lack of a better word. And again, that can be from 1% to 3% as well. Okay. Environmental, more and more now, they're looking at environmental phase one, phase two. So as a result of that, factor that in. Depending on the size of the property, environmental first phase usually is 2,000 to 3,000 is what I've seen. As we go into phase two, it depends on the size of the property. It could be 8,000 and up. I think the largest I've had for I did a land assembly with 8 or 9 units, and that was 25,000 to do a phase two environmental. Okay. Some properties you need a survey, and again, that varies. I'm finding surveys are 1,200, 1,500 and up. Legal fees, I factor that part in based on just the experiences I've had with commercial lawyers. Title insurance, that'll also vary depending on the size of the property itself. Land transfer taxes, the reason why I brought that up is obviously if you're buying a property in Toronto, the land transfer tax is going to require also a municipal land transfer tax over and above the provincial, and that basically doubles. So if you're buying something, a property outside of Toronto, and you buy a property inside of Toronto, that fee doubles. Okay. So other initial expenses are basically your closing costs themselves, and also if you have to do any property improvements before you actually start renting the property, or if you have to do improvements because there's issues with a water leakage, or maybe the sides need to be sealed on the side of the building because there's kind of cracks there and so on. Okay, or landscaping away from the house or away from the building itself because you don't want the water to get in there. Okay?
Robert, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Does this apply to all investment properties, or are we talking strictly the commercial ones that are 5+ units?
Okay, so commercial investment properties, most lenders will go to 4 units before they consider it's a commercial. There is Laurentian Bank and there is Royal Bank that will go up to 6 units at residential rates. There's other lenders, I'm just saying those are the ones I know. They will go up to 6 units as residential. After the 6 units, most people go to commercial properties. So I've done duplexes, triplexes. My biggest so far is a 26 unit property. Okay. But if you have, let's say, a commercial retail space downstairs and you have 1 or 2 apartments upstairs, that's still considered commercial property. And that doesn't fall into the residential rents, if you want to call it that, right? So it all depends on the type of property. If there's any component of commercial in there, then that is considered commercial property. If there's any, if it's more than 4 or 6, depending on the lender, that'd be also considered a commercial property.
Okay, but for someone who's buying like an investment condo or like an investment house with 3 units in it, a lot of these additional fees are not going to be applicable.
Yes, they're not going to be applicable if you can get it from a lender. Right now, I'm finding the banks are tougher on lending money to, like we just did a 4 unit property in the Junction, and the banks won't touch it. So we have to go to a mortgage broker, right? And when we went to the mortgage broker, there was a fee associated with that, like the mortgage broker fees and all that stuff. So I wouldn't say, I guess, I don't know what's going to happen the next little while in terms of COVID, right? But right now, mortgages are harder and harder to come by, is my experience. And like I have a property that I'm selling now that's 700 square feet is commercial, and the rest of it, about 3,000 square feet, is residential. And I'm having a tough time getting a mortgage for that, right? Even though it's only a small component of the property itself. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks.
So ongoing expenses, and all this stuff will go to what I consider the NOI. Okay, you know, property tax is going to be in there. You know, gas, oil, or hydro, depending on whether it's electrically heated or not. Water and sewage, any hot water tank rental, and if you take a look at some of the listings out there, I saw a listing that had an 8% cap on it, and they didn't put the insurance in there, they didn't put the vacancy in there, maintenance, property management, or any of the other expenses in there. So just be careful when you guys are looking at a listing to see what does it include, what doesn't it include, and then some of the other things you may have to guesstimate. Okay, so when we take a look at insurance, as I said, insurance is up now because of what's happened, and then vacancy. I just take the vacancy from CMHC. If you go to the CMHC website, they used to be better in the sense that on CMHC, they could actually narrow it down to a particular neighborhood. But now they don't. They just kind of go east end, west end. So I use that as my vacancy rate. And if you go talk to a true investor, they're always looking for the vacancy rate. You could say, well, it's never been vacant for the last 20 years. It doesn't matter. They still factor that in because at some point somebody's going to move, and therefore I am going to get vacancy if I want to go in there and fix it up. Okay. Maintenance, I'll give you a scenario of what I use for maintenance calculation. Generally, it's between 3 and 6% is the way I put it into my spreadsheet. Property management, if the person's self-property managing themselves, that's fine. But what I'm seeing out there now is between 6 and 10% is your property management fee of your income that you collect. Okay. Some places garbage collections extra, some places more and more I'm seeing landlords are putting internet in there. And the reason for that is because they're putting in smart devices in there, either a smart lock or a Nest, like a temperature control for the building and so on. So there, I'm finding more and more just saying, okay, we're just going to put the internet in there, especially if it's going to be a gross lease versus a net lease. Okay. Snow removal, landscaping, and any other things are all part of the ongoing expenses. So I take all the gross income and I minus all the ongoing expenses to get you a true NOI. Okay. If it's not there and you're trying to work with a client on it, then you want to make sure that you put all that information in if they're buying a property. If you're selling a property, sometimes you might want to manipulate it to the point where you leave a few things out, but you tell them you've left them out. For example, maintenance and property management. They might say, well, you know, we left it out because we figured you guys might want to property manage it yourself. Or we left out maintenance because right now we just did a major reno and we don't really need any maintenance in there. But you can factor in what you want to factor in and put that in. And sometimes what happens when you do that and you put the caveat in there, the cap rate looks a lot bigger. And the idea is no different than any of the marketing that we do is you try to get people to come to your property, start looking at it. And then if it's borderline, they might still consider buying it. Okay, because I just sold a property that was a little bit borderline in expenses and so on. But the investor figures that maybe we're not getting an increase this year, but in next year I'll get an increase. Maybe the following year I get an increase, and they're going to do that. And also they may turn around and just say, I'm just going to live in one of the units, and after a year I'll raise the rents, right? And I'm seeing some of that happening as well. Okay. Maintenance calculations. Usually I kind of take a look at the property. I know that in the industry they talk about you should always have a maintenance for your house that's approximately 2.5% of your current property value. Okay. And the current property value is important because I have seen a lot of investors that have a property and they rent it at a cheap rent and they fill it. However, it doesn't support the current property value, especially when they want to try and sell it. Okay. And you know, that's where you get below market rents and all that. And then you will see listings out there that don't even have an analysis of the property itself. Like you ask them, do you have the insurance? Do you have this? Do you have this? And they don't have any of that stuff. So typically, I guess when you're putting up investment properties out there, I'd like to have people at least look at us and saying, okay, we kind of know what we're talking about, especially when we're putting a property in there. And just as a result of some of the things that I do have done, I've actually had agents from other brokerages come to me and ask me to do an analysis for them, or they've co-listed with me on properties because of the detail that I do on the property itself. Okay, so 2.5% of current value. If the current value is $1 million, expect to spend up to $25,000 for the year, or you can go by per square foot. That's another option that you can do. I don't know too many people who go by per square foot, right? And also, if there's an age formula and they haven't done anything, and you're looking up to 50 years old, then I would say factor in about 15% for you to bring it up so you can get the best rents possible. Okay, and there, you know, or you could do a combination of what's there. Like you can take a look and say, okay, well, 2.5% of the current value plus $250 per square foot. You might want to divide that by 2 and get an average between the two scenarios that you have. Okay. So this is a sample of the outcome of a spreadsheet that I do. Okay. I've got it here that it's a $2 million property. And because there's commercial, a small portion of commercial and residential, I need 35% down. If you have 1 to 2 units, you can do 10%. If you have 3 or 4 units, you need 20%. If you're going to live in it, some of the rules changes with regards to that. And then I usually talk to my mortgage brokers and find out what is the current interest rate. I know the interest rates are climbing right now. So as a result of that, I've put down 3% in this particular scenario, even though we know we've gotten about 2.6, 2.7 for a commercial property. If it's more commercial, I'd be looking at 3.5, 4%. Okay, but if it's because this one is commercial residential, I don't have that. I also factored in, sorry, I skipped this. I also factored in if you need a VTB or seller take back mortgage, a vendor take back mortgage. And then there you have different scenarios. You could have it where it's principal and interest. You could have it just interest only in order to make that deal work. Okay. So what I have here is your 700,000 is 35% of your down payment. Land transfer tax, you know, you're looking at that for land transfer tax in the city of Toronto. This particular unit has 4 units, so I've allocated 800 for it. Financing costs, the reason why it's in yellow is because I haven't finished the spreadsheet where the financing cost would be if you're carrying it while you are renovating it. Okay, and same with the other, because that would be, you know, how much it's going to cost you to bring it up so that you can charge the most rent possible. Okay, the legal fees here includes the title insurance, and I just used, I think, Stewart Title Insurance. I went on their website, figured out what title insurance might cost based on the formula that they have in there. Okay, the gross rents, I break down monthly, annually, right? They don't make any money from laundry because each unit in this particular case has their own. So my total income is basically what you see here. Okay. And then on the expenses side, there's no heating in this particular property. There's no heating because it's an electric building. And the reason why there's no money in the electricity is because each tenant pays their own hydro. Okay. If you have to pay it, then you would fill the numbers into here to make it work. Water and sewage, I put that in, and water, I usually include either the hot water tank in here or in here, depending on your scenario. Doesn't matter, it all kind of comes down to the costs anyways, okay? Property taxes, I do break it down. If there's any condo fees, because I know you asked if the person was to buy a condo, what are the condo fees? Condo fees does impact how much money you can borrow as well, because they will take a portion of the condo fees as part of the payment, if you want to call it that. Okay. Insurance, as I said, this particular property, their insurance was about just a little over 3,000 last year, and then this year bumped up to 5,000. Okay, a lot of this stuff is an actual property. I just wanted to show you there. Okay, and the hot water tank rental is not included because these people actually bought the hot water tanks themselves. Okay, snow removal and the cost there, but some of the stuff I put in here, for example, the property taxes is 11.7. However, the commercial tenant pays the commercial portion of the property taxes. Okay, in this particular case, 11.7 is the full property taxes. However, the reality is 45% of that is allocated to the commercial tenant. Okay, so they normally would pay that. And then from an insurance standpoint, I take a look at the insurance policies. Some insurance policies will allocate so much to commercial and so much to residential. If they don't, I use the property tax portion of it to calculate what the insurance is going to be. Okay, and then in terms of any of the other things like water and all that stuff, it depends on what the what's on the lease itself. If this is a purely residential property, the property taxes wouldn't be paid. Water would be paid by the landlord. The property taxes would be paid by the landlord. Heating and gas, sometimes you can arrange with the tenant to pay a portion of that. Okay, I've allocated 6% for property management, and that's the lowest I've seen. But as I said, take a look and see who's around. But on average, I'm seeing 7%, 8% is common now. Okay, and this property doesn't really mean anything. What happened was there was an insurance claim, so they did a lot of rentals because of the insurance claim. So I put it on the lower side at 3%. Okay. Snow removal actually is paid for by the commercial tenant. So now what I have is I have an income of 111,000, a gross income. I take away my 30,000, that brings me to, and I put a vacancy allowance, and I got that from CMHC. So now I'm at 79,000 for the year, and that's my NOI. Okay. Once I take down my debt, right, then that's basically my works out to be my cash flow. All right, because the financing will be this much, and then here you'll see that. My monthly positive cash flow is about $500 a month, right? You'll see that I've also calculated the cap rate on here, and the cap rate is 3.99. In Toronto, that's good. Outside of Toronto, that's not good. Okay, I'm seeing between 3 and 4% is common in Toronto. Once you get out of Toronto, I've seen 5-6% still possible. Some of the areas that are getting hot right now, in everything I've seen, is St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Hamilton's too done, London's still okay, Cambridge, Kitchener, it's kind of stable right now over there. Okay, there's a couple of things in here which the mortgage lenders look at. It automatically calculates it, but it's really not relevant for what we need to do. Okay. Now, if you go down here, this 6,000 a year, that comes from here. That's your positive cash flow, right? So on your return, you're getting 0.79%. However, the reason why I took the property appreciation in the last 5 years is so I can guesstimate in the last 5 years how much have properties in this area grown. And I came up with 15.9%. So my equity grows, assuming, and I do have a caveat, assuming that you have a 15.9 or 16% growth per year, that's how much your building is going to go up. There's no guarantees on that. I'm just saying that that's just the analysis that we've done. And it also figures out what have I paid down in my mortgage, which is 4.62%. So then it calculates this number here is a reflection if there's a VTB involved as well. Okay, so essentially in your first year, you are basically having a gain of 360,000 approximately for that property. So if you were to turn around, try and sell it next year, in theory, you would have 360,000. But if you take a look at year 3, 5, 7, 10, what I said to you was, if you anticipate what do you call it, the property tax increase, but this is the property tax increase is calculated based on the 5-year scenario, the appreciation calculated based on that, but you can anticipate what's the what do you call it thing, the utilities is going to go up by. You can anticipate what the insurance is going to go up by, and so on. And that's how I've been able to get this scenarios in here to show them where the increases might be over a period of time based on what it is doing today. Okay, so if I were to go in there, and let me just kind of share a different screen. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. Can everybody see that? See, I have a spreadsheet in there which kind of puts down what's the property address. Is it in Toronto, not in Toronto? Are you self-employed, because CMHC rules changes if you're self-employed or not? What's the asking price? What's the purchase price? The way I've got set up in all my stuff is anything in the yellow is stuff you would put in. Anything that's white, it automatically calculates for you. Okay, so you're going to see the mortgage itself, and if there's a VTB that goes in there, what's the average property prices 5 years ago and today, and also property taxes. Then I kind of go into the income, all the units and all that stuff that's there. I look at all my initial expenses, which we've kind of talked about most of them in the presentation, and then I go into what are my ongoing expenses, and all those numbers kind of come out, and they proliferate into my spreadsheet everywhere, including my estimated costs for vacancy, advertising, and so on. Okay, and in here I'll put the unit apartments in there and how much rent they're collecting. I also use this particular part of the spreadsheet to show what the monthly rents are, what the units are, whether they're a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and so on, and if they're on a lease or month to month. When did they start? Is it included, excluded? Do they pay extra for it, and so on? And a lot of times when I'm listing a property, I will provide this to a potential buyer so they can have that information, including who's the tenant name and all that. I don't provide that unless I actually get an offer. I'm just saying that, you know, that information for them, because they're going to want a rent roll. If it's just 3 units, it's probably not as big a deal. But if you start getting into the 5, 6s, 10s, 15 units, then I would use that. This is my snapshot that I showed you before. Okay, the pro forma and that I haven't done anything with it because I'm working on adding to the spreadsheet that if I have to renovate a property, I put that in. Okay. Ongoing expenses, this is what I was talking about. What do you anticipate the increases are going to be for all the different things that you have in there? And it, again, it all does the calculation for me. Okay. If this is the refinance that I was going to start working on. Here's my closing costs, which basically says, you know, if you're a buyer, what's your closing cost? If you're a seller, what's your closing cost? Can you guys tell I have a C personality in me as well? And then here I do calculations for CMHC, land transfer tax, and title insurance. Okay, and the standard mortgage, VTB, principal and interest, VTB interest only. Okay, this is the table where I keep track of all the rent increases, and I find out the last 3 years, the last 5 years, the last 10 years, what the average increases have been. And every year I just update that so that it fills it out, and it calculates my averages for me, right? And here we talk a little bit about the terminology that is there. There's a few other things I'm working on this spreadsheet, but I'm just saying that for the most part, that's what I've got in there. What questions do you guys have for me? Anyone? Anyone?
I know
Viewer?
go to when I'm looking at commercial properties and investment.
Yeah, I just so you guys know, I have whenever I've taught a course, I usually say to somebody, if you want me to work with you, no problem. Like if you want to say, I want to learn, and I'm willing to work with you on it. If I know I've had agents come to me and say, yeah, I want to learn. And then after they start getting into it, they go, forget it, just take it. I'll just give you a referral fee, right? So I've had both of those, and I'm open to anybody who wants to learn. I'm open to anybody who wants to ask me questions. If it's simple, it's simple. If it gets a little bit more complex, then we'll take a look at it from a standpoint of, do you want me to take care of it? Do you want me to still work with you on it? And so on and so forth. Okay. So no issues there. And as I said, I do both commercial, residential. I do both land. So there's a bunch of things that I do, and so I can certainly help you. One of the things I guess I didn't mention at the beginning was I was a broker of record at another KW office for about 10 years. So if anybody has a question they want to ask, if you can't find Philip, I'd be happy to step in and answer the questions that, if I have to give you a caveat because Philip has to be the person that looks after us, then I'll tell you that too. But I'm a open resource whenever I can get to answering your stuff. Let's see. I had some. What other questions do you guys have for me? I can't see what's in the chat. I'm kind of like technologically not doing as well. Andy, how do I find out what's in the chat and if I should be answering something?
So in the Zoom window at the bottom, you'll see a chat button.
Yeah, I do see a chat button, but I click on it and nothing pops up on my screen anywhere. Oh, there you go. I don't think Robert is reading the chat. If you have a question, please unmute yourself, ask directly. Oh, okay. So I'm not. Okay, I think I answered the question about. Sorry, I'm trying to look through my screen here. Does this apply to all investment properties? I think Robin asked that. Yeah, so I think I answered that question. Yes. 20%. The broker doesn't charge fees for the properties if they can go to a regular lender, a first tier or second tier lender. But if they have to go to a private or an investor type thing, then yes, there is going to be fees on that. Okay, security cameras. I'm not quite sure what the question is on that.
I think that might have been part of the, when you were talking about maintenance or management fees.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
When we're talking about internet.
I haven't seen too many people with a security cameras. If you want to put that in, you can, but I haven't seen too many with security cameras. I know that there's one person I'm working with. They really want to put it in because apparently the tenant is doing damage to their property. They're actually leaving the water running and it's flooding the main floor and actually wrecked the roof, the ceiling of the main floor, stuff like that. And they wanted to put in the security cameras in there. But unless it's a commercial type property, like a commercial property versus a residential commercial property, I don't see too many security cameras built in there. Okay. Scott, your question, 15% of what? Of the current market value of the property. Let's see. Okay. So what other questions do you guys have now that I figured out how to use the chat?
I missed the first 15 minutes, so I apologize firstly. And second of all, if I asked you something that you covered, I apologize again.
No
When
issue.
you're going to the bank and let's say you're under a 6-unit or let's say a 4-unit, are they looking at cap rates and ROIs when they're, and if they are, is there a minimum?
They are looking to see if it's a viable investment. If you're living there yourself, they don't look at the numbers themselves, but they are looking at the numbers to see if it's viable. And that's one of the issues I have right now with a property I've got listed where I have a pharmacist, good income and all that stuff. They've gone to their bank at Scotiabank, and the bank says there's not enough income in here. I can't lend you the money. Okay. But weird things are going on right now with lenders is what I'm finding. So when I say the question to you, when I give you the answer here, that's not necessarily the standard, right? Prior to COVID, there was a lot of stuff that they didn't care about, but now with COVID, more and more so, especially with the way the tenant situation is, where tenants are not paying rent and they're doing a number on the landlords. I'm just finding that some of that flies out the window. Okay, but they will look at whether the income is there. At least Scotia is, because that's my latest scenario where they've looked at it and they go, you don't have enough income, we can't lend you the money. Right? But in the future, because the commercial lease ends in January, in the future, the person looking to buy it has indicated they may put their own pharmacy in there. And when they do that, then they're more lax on it. To say, hey, you're using the building yourself. So as a result of that, whether you use the residential portion or the commercial portion, they like it when you're part of the building itself. Right? Because I mean, we buy houses that are $1 million and we borrow 80% of that and we're okay from that perspective. But can I live in a 700,000 that still gives me everything I need and maybe not have as large of a mortgage? Yeah. But unfortunately, we want what we want. What other questions can I answer for you guys? I guess, there was one thing I was trying to...
HSC. HSC on commercial portion.
Yes, there is, unless you have an HST number.
Yeah.
So normally what would happen if somebody's buying something with a commercial component in there, I make sure that the buyer puts an HST clause in there. Because I want to make sure if they have an HST number, then they don't get charged the HST, it's passed through.
So be careful if you're listing a property as well, if you're a listing agent.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Is that it? Let's say it's a mixed use property.
Correct.
Is that HST on the entire building or just on the commercial component? If to say
On
it's
the
commercial
commercial
resident.
On the
Pardon me?
commercial component.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Right now, I don't know too many lenders that lend over a 30-year amortization. That's one thing I've noticed. There's a couple other things. I think you started on something, I remembered it, and then I guess it was answering your question. I forgot what it was. 4 or 6 units. Yeah, if I remember, I'll bring it up. Okay. What other questions?
Are you guys in, do insurance companies still do a lot of mortgages?
Are insurance companies doing mortgages? I've not encountered one yet.
Because you could, 20 years ago, the banks weren't really doing mortgages. You had to get everything through the insurance companies.
Right. But I haven't seen anything. I'm seeing private investors and I'm seeing banks.
Yeah.
But once they get into commercial, my personal opinion, I don't know if there's any bank people on this call, but my personal opinion is if you have to get into a commercial type property, don't go to a bank.
Yeah.
Because they've never done anything well for me. for any of my clients if it's a commercial type property.
So do you recommend them take a mortgage on their own house and use the cash?
They can. There is a way, I think it's called a Smith method or whatever, but I would go talk to an accountant and say, how can I do this properly so that I can actually write off that?
Yeah.
Because I know people have purchased properties and they borrowed against their house, but how they do it, there's a whole process how you do it so you can get your mortgage and your home tax deductible.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an option for sure. Right. What else can I answer for you?
I think we're good.
Okay. Happy to help anybody. If you have to list a property that's a multiplex, I'm happy to kind of work with you on, you know, putting a spreadsheet together or a snapshot or whatever together. Just let me know. If you want to connect with me directly, just because you had other questions that either you didn't ask now or you didn't think of now, by all means, give me a call as well. Happy to help on that front as well.
Robert, are you part of RAIN?
I was part of RAIN. I'm no longer part of RAIN. I just found that some of the stuff in there was helpful. Some of the logic, and just so you know, part of my spreadsheet came from RAIN. I developed
Property analyzer.
Yeah, so I developed it based on that, but I've kind of gone, as I said, this all started as a closing cost spreadsheet.
Mhm.
And as you can tell, I have so many tabs in the bottom now that even me trying to keep up with all the different pages, it's kind of problematic. I need to revamp the whole spreadsheet and try and figure out how I can do this better.
It's impressive and intimidating.
The spreadsheet, yeah, the
Yeah.
spreadsheet, once you understand it, as I understand it, but once you understand it, it becomes it becomes less intimidating, I find, right? And you know, it's just a matter of plugging in numbers and then seeing the stuff kind of automatically calculate for you. But as I said, there's things that I still do manually. I wish it would calculate it for me automatically, but I'm not an Excel person. But if there's somebody out there who's an Excel person and is willing to sit with me, I can do this and I can certainly share it with you guys so that it's more done. Somebody actually said to me I should go to Apple and try and sell this spreadsheet as an app for $1.99 or something. But there are programs out there, there are apps out there that will do a quick analysis of your property. I just get into more detail. And this, the snapshot that I was telling you about, this snapshot that I'm talking about, this snapshot here, a lot of my clients use that now as their go-to because it gives them a lot more information. I know a few of my investors who have been investors of mine for many years now have now gone to this spreadsheet as their go-to. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. If you go to a bank, banks tend to go no more than 10 doors. And what I mean by a door is if you have a fourplex and you have a triplex and you have a triplex, that's already 10 units or 10 doors. Once you get past 10 doors, the banks won't kind of look at you if you're looking at investment. If you're looking as an investor, my suggestion is look for a good mortgage broker that will work on investment properties, because then you have some of these people, some of my colleagues. I have somebody in Kitchener that's 77 doors. I have somebody who has over 200 and something doors, and he's in working out of the Burlington office. But what I'm saying is that, you know, if you start working with the banks at some point, you get stuck. And one of my clients had actually got 30 doors and he got stuck with it. So we're just in the process of trying to revamp his mortgages with a mortgage broker. Okay, so just keep that in mind as well, that the mortgage, I look at it from a standpoint that we're part of the team, the realtor, the mortgage person, the insurance company, the lawyer, the accountant. That's all part of the team. It's no different than somebody buying a house. We're part of that team. The lawyer's part of that team. The mortgage person is part of that team, and the buyer, the seller is part of that team. So just make sure there's a good team around you. And I've got a few people, like I got a few mortgage brokers that I go to as my go-to. I've got a few lawyers that's my go-to. I have some lawyers that just do leases, whether it's a residential lease, commercial lease. And fortunately, I don't have too many lawyers that deal with, I guess, what I call tenants who don't pay, right? So I haven't had too much of that as part of the issue that I have. So I don't know anybody who does specifically, like a paralegal that does specifically tenant issues or landlord issues, right? Knock wood. So far, all my guys have been pretty good. They look after their tenants. Like I don't know if anybody that's a slumlord in my stable of investors, right? And if they are, typically I won't work with them because there's a reputation I want to keep as well.
Do you ever do any rooming houses anymore?
No, rooming houses are hard to get financing, and they got good income, but I've only seen maybe 3 or 4 in the last year that I've seen pop up.
There's not very many in Toronto anymore anyway.
No, I mean, if there is, it's just not something that we see anymore, right? And as I said, financing is tough for rooming houses. What other questions can I answer for you?
Hey, Robert, is there any difference between like a long-term tenant who's going to be residing in the property versus anything around like Airbnb?
Long-term tenant that lives in a property can cause a problem down the road in terms of your return on investment because their rents are going to be below market rents. I have tenants that are paying over $300 per unit. In fact, I have a 2-bedroom townhouse. This is in Sarnia. One of my clients has that. And they've been paying $700 rent for a 2-bedroom townhouse. And they've been there for 10, 12 years, I guess, right? So trying to sell the property, and the current rents right now is about 12 to 1,500, and they're paying 700. It does affect your sellability of the property and to get the maximum return, okay? But in terms of Airbnb, those are still really within the rules of the municipality. I don't know if what happens there. Like I'm just saying that, you could buy a house, convert it to an Airbnb, but you're under the control of what the city says, unless you're going to do something illegal. Okay, so then that basically becomes the next thing, is if you're doing something illegal.
And from the mortgage side of things, does it matter if you're telling them I'm going to run an Airbnb out of this?
Insurance may have an impact. I don't know about mortgages. I haven't encountered that. None of my clients have that. Most of my clients just basically have residential tenants, like, month, year to year kind of tenants. Okay. Anything else, anyone?
Robert, quick question. What's your experience in the land assembly transaction? Can you share the information?
In what?
Yeah.
What's my experience in what?
Land assembly.
Have I done land assemblies?
Yeah.
Many over the years.
So from the seller perspective, how can you tell the value of that investment in the land assembly, especially for the residential projects?
I work with, I know this is a little bit off topic. If you guys are okay, I'll answer the question. I know that land value, there's a buyer side and there's a seller side. On average, depending on the builder, some builders will want 20-25% as their profit buffer. There is a builder that is looking for 40% as their profit / buffer because they don't know what the market's going to do. Okay, so if it's anything less than the 20-25, then they may not be interested because they look at it and they go, geez, you know what? If we get a turn, then we may potentially be losing money. But by the same token, if it's positive, they could be making more than 20-25%. But for most builders that are larger type builders, if they don't get their 20-25%, they won't be interested in a property. Okay. As far as land assembly goes, typically when you approach a seller and they go, oh, a builder wants to buy it. I'll give you an example. I'm actually going to be listing a property soon. The property is worth maybe 2.2 million. For an end user, that's what it's worth. It's about 56 acres. And, you know, based on comparables around the neighborhood, I'm looking at 2.2 million. However, when we said we were going to try and see if we can approach a builder to see if any interest, the price went up to 4 million. Okay, is it reasonable? The way I kind of look at that is I pitch it to a builder or a developer, and they look at it and they go, okay, we can make this work. Because you know what? I don't have the experience of actually developing a piece or building a piece. I have a piece now that I'm trying to sell. It's 1.58 acres. Okay, so that's you know, about 60,000-70,000 square feet. Okay, what do you guys think that you could put on there? Anybody hazard a guess? Acre and a half.
Some detached combination.
Well, whatever. I'm just saying, what do you think you can put on an acre and a half?
You can put a condo, you can put townhouse development.
Okay. How many townhouses do you figure you can get in there?
18, 20.
Okay. So see, that's what I'm saying. I don't profess to be knowledgeable enough to do that, but I've got a seller now that's got that exact piece, 1.58 acres, and he's putting 60 stacked townhomes on it. Okay, so I look at that and I go,
wow.
You know, unless you're the developer, I don't have enough knowledge of what a developer can do. I went to a property at Leslie and Gerard. I saw the property, and I've got an architectural background. So when I was looking at it, I go, you know what? I think I could put 66 stacked townhomes in this particular property. It intrigued a buyer, a developer, to come in. He goes, I can see 33 in an acre, but you're telling me 66 in an acre? I got to see this property. And he's been one of my best clients ever since then, right? But as I said, I came up with the idea and I said, well, here's how you can do it. And he says, I like the idea. So we tried to buy the property, right? Then you get challenges from the neighbors and all that kind of stuff, right? But all I'm saying is to assemble a property, there's a way of doing it, because as soon as everybody knows that you're assembling it, I've got an assembly that is 1.7 acres in the city of Toronto, and legally, zoning wise, you can build 7 stories on it, but they know people. And because they know people, they will allow us to put 15 stories on it. And as soon as they found that out, the price of that land went to 32 million. right? So from my perspective, I just say, you know, there's a way of approaching it without everybody getting greedy and wanting the money. So the only thing I can say to you is, you can try and do a land assembly, and the land assembly will basically work if it meets the builder's criteria and the developer's criteria, and also if the people who are selling it, they make some money and everybody makes some money. What I've more noticed is the unrealistic expectations of the sellers. And that's what kills a lot of the deals, is the unrealistic expectations.
Right. Thanks for the information, Robert. I may call you later on.
Yeah.
For further
That's
discussion.
We can chat,
Yeah.
because as I said, I do have a few pieces of land that I'm, you know, pitching to different people. I've got like 100 acres in King City. I've got 100 acres in Innisfil, 150 acres in Barrie. I had a small property at Greenwood and Gerard, but that's gone, right? So anyways, I'm happy to talk land assemblies and land with anybody who has a builder as well.
Okay.
What
Thanks.
other questions do you guys have for me? Whether it be related to this or not, I know we've kind of gone off topic a little bit, but I'm happy to ask and answer any questions you guys may have. We're good? Okay. If there's no other questions, I want to thank you guys for attending the session. Reach out to me if you need to. I'm happy to answer the calls and go from there. Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Great session.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Robert.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Bye.